Let's go.
Equity Mates!
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.
Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates, a podcast that follows our journey of investing. And whether you're an absolute beginner or approaching Warren Buffett status, our aim is to help break down your barriers from beginning to dividend. Now, if you've joined us for the very first time, a huge welcome. It's great that you've got started on your investing journey. If you want to get up to speed with the absolute basics, head across to our Get Started Investing podcast. Otherwise, let's get stuck in. My name is Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy, Ren. How are you?
I'm very good, Bryce. Very excited for this episode. Loving this series that we're doing.
Yep.
Ask an Advisor. On the podcast here, we're getting some of Australia's best financial advisors into the studio, and we're asking them our questions and the questions from the Equity Mates community. And if you're not subscribed to our mailing list, you might be missing our Ask an Advisor email that Bryce sends out every Thursday, which again is another forum to ask these advisors questions. We know the cost of financial advice is unaffordable for most. It's certainly unaffordable for us. And this is our opportunity to use the platform to ask some advisors some questions. Yeah,
we've had some awesome questions come in that we'll cover in this episode, but also that we're covering weekly in the EDM. So the email sign up is in the show notes. So make sure you sign up to that if you're not already. But today's advisor is Ben Wauchope from Wealth Health Co. And the overall theme of today's episode is financial well-being and how to set yourself up at different stages of your life. A lot of the questions, as I said, have come in from the community, so a massive shout out to you guys. Keep them coming. ask@equitymates.com is the email to send through your questions. That's ask@equitymates.com. But Ren, without further ado, let's jump straight into it.
Let's do it.
Well, Ben, welcome to Equity Mates.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So this is part of the Ask an Advisor series, and we are going to cover a few different topics today. We've got cost of living questions that have come in from the community, and then a bit around financial well-being and how we can set up financial well-being and security at different stages of our life. So let's kick off with the cost of living questions. And the first one that has come through from the community is, how much of my income should go towards my rent or my mortgage as a percentage?
Well, yeah, I mean, this will really depend on where you're situated in terms of family and work, because it's not that easy just to relocate in order to reduce those costs. But I would say if you're sort of young, to try and reduce these costs as much as possible. So if you've got the luxury of staying at home with mum and dad, don't take this for granted. It's a sort of a great way to keep costs low, allowing you to sort of save more over time. The other way, I guess, if you have to rent, would be renting a room in a share house, which is going to be much cheaper than renting a place by yourself. Obviously, as you get older, living in a share house, you're probably going to get over it. So, as you get older, you probably want to get your own space. So reducing these costs when you're younger, you should be able to put more towards saving for your sort of first deposit of your own home. But I guess the general rule of thumb, I mean, Scott Pate, the Barefoot Investor, noted in his book, it was sort of no more than 25% of your take-home pay. As interest rates rising, that sort of makes it a little bit more difficult, especially if you're sort of living in a capital city like Sydney or Brisbane, where house prices are pretty high. You've got rising interest rates. So I guess, there's no probably right answer there, but, I guess there's that mark of 25 to 30%.
Yeah, I've always heard the 30%, and I've always just shook my head at that.
In what sense?
Well, just like, who's paying 30% or less of their gross take-home pay on housing? It feels like most people are going to be over that at this time. Is that what you're saying in your clients?
30%, I guess if you're in a couple, that 30% of net take home is going to be an easier target to hit.
True.
It's a lot harder as a single 30%. Yeah, good luck with that. And I guess it really depends on where you're living as well. And I guess it really depends on what's important to you. Like, do you value spending more time on where and how you live, or other lifestyle choices, or sort of improving your financial position for your future? So, if you want to live in the city, then, and that's what you value, then spending sort of a higher percentage of your take-home pay, you're happy to make that trade-off, where if it's more about sort of, improving your future position, then maybe taking a property, further out, not as close to the city, would benefit you.
It's a challenge. We had an interview yesterday with a guy, Matt Barry, who was speaking about the housing market, and he was giving examples of people paying 70 to 80% of income, which is just like, what does that leave you with? Not a lot. Yeah. Anyway, next question that has come in, Ben, is what are some of the best tips to help me get out of consumer debt that I racked up at university? We've all been there.
Well, first, so I think it's important to sort of define what consumer debt actually is, because some people might not know that. So consumer debt refers to sort of the debt incurred by individuals for personal or household consumption purposes. So taking out debt to acquire everyday expenses or major purchases, things like, credit cards, personal loans, car loans, or buy now, pay later services, which is that they're quite popular these days. So in terms of those debts, what are tips to help me get out of them? I guess the first mistake I see a lot of my clients do is solely focus on paying down their consumer debt first at the expense of generating like an emergency fund or cash reserve. I always advise my clients to build a cash reserve first before paying down their consumer debt, because the issue is that you're going to make some progress paying down this consumer debt, but then if you're sort of hit with any other unexpected costs, so your car might break down, you've got some sort of medical issue, or you've got, one of your pets gets sick, then you don't have any other savings to rely on to pay those expenses. And then you're just forced to rely back on other consumer debt. So taking out more credit cards, and you just get in this sort of debt trap. So I'd say the first thing is to, make sure that you've got a cash flow plan in place. You're spending less than you earn, and then you sort of get that buffer initially. So that might be 5 or 10 or 15 grand. And then you focus on paying down that consumer debt from there. I guess if you've already got that financial sort of cushion in terms of a cash reserve, but you're sort of stuck with this high interest debt that's accumulating over time. I actually had a client last week and she had sort of one of these payday loans, and the interest rate was 49%.
Oh,
what?
And so she was just, paying $100 a week to this, and it was just interest. So it wasn't paying it down. So I guess in that case, you could look at something like a balance transfer on a credit card that has a interest-free period. So they're generally 12 to 24 months, where you can take over that debt with a new credit. So pay it out using this balance transfer on a credit card. What you just have to make sure is that you're not making any new purchases on the credit card, because the new purchases may accrue interest, and payments may be allocated towards the balance transfer amount first. So then you're just going to start accruing interest on the new purchases. So you would only just use this as a way to clear that existing debt and then pay it off within the interest-free period. So that's one strategy, but you've got to be careful with, I guess, making sure that you're doing it correctly, and you've got the ability to obtain a new credit facility.
Yeah, the first point was an interesting one. I think when you're leaving uni and you've racked up a few beers on the credit card, you're not likely to have an emergency fund or a buffer cash, and the psychology of wanting to pay that off first before, building that emergency fund, I think is one that people would grapple with, because, you just want to get rid of that debt. But you can understand how you do get in that trap if things do pop up, you don't have the cash there, you keep relying on it. So it's some good advice.
One other question, Ben, that we got from the community around cost of living was around setting up a good cash flow system. I think, especially these days, we've mentioned housing and stuff like that. It can be hard to feel like you're getting ahead. So what are the building blocks that we can put in place to set up a good cash flow system?
So I would say firstly that, cash flow is the most important aspect to anyone's finances. So you could earn, you could be a high income earner, but if you spend all the money that you earn, you're not going to get ahead. So having really good sort of habits and behavior around your cash flow is the most important thing to, I guess, succeeding from a financial point of view. And that sort of really starts with knowing what your income is. So most people, if they're salary and wage employees, they know that they've got a regular fortnightly or monthly or weekly income. For other people that may be doing shift work, that might change a little bit because you've got, overtime or penalty allowances. But it's, I guess, getting a figure that's going to regularly come in that is going to be there. And then the second step is knowing your expenditure. So what does it cost you to live? And that can be really hard. So, there are some applications like apps like Frollo. That's a free one. There's a few other ones like MoneySoft that I use that does a data scrape of your bank accounts and your transactions.
Okay.
So we can sort of sit down and go, okay, well, over the past 12 months, this is what you've spent, and we know the actual figures.
So just on that, does that, because Ren's had this gripe with CBA and the not actually, I think the app tries to categorize your spending, but it doesn't do a good job at it.
You get these broad and ultimately useless categorizations, and you can set the categorizations yourself, but they're so broad and there's 8 buckets. You can't actually get any meaningful insight into how you're spending. Yeah.
So do these apps do a good job at that?
Well, from MoneySoft, I guess it's what I do for a job. So I've set all my rules up, which took a long time,
right.
And then I've got to go through. It doesn't automatically get it right, from the beginning. So I've got to go in and then recategorize it. So that probably takes that's the biggest time that I spend. But I think it's just so important to get those figures to show, okay, well, this is what it's costing you to live at the moment. So we know the figures. And then we can break it down further and go, okay, well, these are your sort of fixed costs. Your loans, your bills, medical costs, your insurances, utilities, all of these things that you can't really get away from. It just costs. It's just the cost of living, as opposed to your discretionary costs, which are going out to the pub or going out for buying concert tickets or shopping, which you have full sort of control over on whether you spend that money or not. So it's breaking it down into your fixed costs and then your discretionary costs, and then knowing, okay, well, my loans are costing me this, my fixed costs are costing me this, I've got X amount left over that I can then either decide to spend on discretionary costs, and if I want to get into a surplus position, so I'm saving money moving forward, then I know that I have to spend X amount on discretionary costs, because if I spend more, I'm going to either spend everything that I earn or I'm going to actually spend more than I earn. So you then have you can have a bank account structure that you've got, your bills accounted for, your loans accounted for, and then you might get a weekly allowance into your fun spending discretionary money of whatever that may be, leaving X amount left over to put towards your other financial goals. So it's having sort of a bank account structure where you've got set, I guess, allowances, and generally setting these up to be automated is a good thing. So, you might get paid on every Thursday. So these automatic transfers goes into these other bank accounts on the Friday, and then you've got, okay, $200 this week to spend on fun. And if I spend more than that, then I'm going to be eating into another bucket, and it's going to break down, and I'm going to forgo achieving my goals, for this week. But you're making that educated decision. So having the numbers is really important.
Well, that's good, because that's what Ren and I have spoken about on the show, is the power of automating as much of your cash management as possible. So Ben, when we were preparing for the interview, we let the community know that you're from Wealth Health Co. and have a focus on financial well-being. And one of the questions that came from the community was that they keep hearing about financial well-being, but want to understand what it is beyond just, I guess, financial security. Is there more to it? Is it a buzzword? How do you define sort of financial well-being?
Yeah, okay. So, so I guess firstly, well-being is defined as the state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy. So to me, financial well-being is knowing that you're in control of your finances. So what does that mean? You've got, your cash flow, that you're earning more than you're spending, and that you're not in a state of financial stress. So you're able to meet your obligations, your loans on time, and you're not, in fear of missing any repayments, and that you're confident that you're working towards your financial goals. So Yeah, I think it's just being comfortable and happy in the fact that you're going to be able to achieve what you want to achieve.
So, in terms of setting up good practices to establish financial well-being, how do you talk to your clients about getting to that point of feeling comfortable, feeling happy? Yeah, take us through, I guess, the key pillars in achieving financial well-being.
Yeah, okay. I guess the first one is really knowing your why. So define what you really want in life, why you want it, and what makes you tick, because that's the first. There's no point like working towards a financial sort of goal if it doesn't make you, if it's not aligned with your sort of personal values. So that's the first stage I start with any client, is really working out what's important to them. And a lot of people haven't taken that time to work that out. They're so busy, head down, bum up, day to day working, that they haven't actually taken the time to work out, where do I want to be in 5 years, in 10 years? And so I'd say, knowing your why, what makes you tick, is the first part of that. The second part is knowing that finances do play a big role in your life. So the key pillars of any sort of life, you've got health, relationships, finances are a big part of it. So being aware of that and not sticking your head in the sand, and really trying to better your understanding of financial aspects of your life, I think is a big part. So your financial mindset is really important. So, I think that has come a long way in the last sort of 10 years with, the podcast, like a lot of, different podcasts and different access to sort of financial information is helping people, to improve that. Thirdly, I'd probably say, knowing your numbers is a big part of it. So, knowing your income or what you earn, your expenses, your debts, so what you owe, and then your assets around what you own. Because if you know this, it sort of provides a clear picture of your current financial situation. And without this knowledge, I guess it's difficult to create a financial plan that is going to help you achieve your why. So going back to that first point around, what is important to me. Finally, I would just say paying attention to your finances is super important as well. And so what I mean by this is, if you've got a mortgage, knowing what your interest rate is, knowing your entitlements at work, if you've got any like employee benefits, like salary packaging entitlements, just paying attention to everything and trying to sort of, I guess, get the best deal that you can, and making your sort of finances as most efficient as possible, because that can drastically improve, I guess, your overall financial position.
That last point, paying attention to your finances, is an interesting one, because on one hand, we say, over trading is hazardous to your wealth, and you don't want to be checking your portfolio all the time. And the best money plans are ones that are automated and, regular. And then on the other hand, it's, you've got to pay attention to your finances and have your finger on the pulse of what's going on and stuff like that. And I guess the way I approach that dichotomy, or whatever you want to call it, is every quarter I put time aside to just check on like all the key financial stuff, like how are my investments going, all of that. Luckily, I don't have any consumer debt at the moment or a mortgage, but that would fold into that sort of quarterly just financial check-in. For your clients, how do you advise them to, I guess, set themselves up and manage their time so that they are both paying attention to their finances, but then not paying too much attention that they're becoming obsessed or, looking too much and then making silly decisions because they're panicking day to day? Yeah,
it's a good point. I think so paying attention to, there's overkill. So, let's say with your mortgage, you probably want to be, reviewing your mortgage probably every 1 to probably 2 years. So if you're looking to refinance or going back to the bank, there's no point doing it every month, because you're not going to get anywhere with that. So if you've refinanced to get a lower interest rate, then it's probably unlikely that you're going to be able to get refinance again in another 6 months time, because you're still going to be fairly in the market. So maybe every 2 years you want to be checking in on things like that. I guess all your sort of general insurances, your private health, your car, your home and contents, that type of thing, probably reviewing them every year or two as well. So even just going to some comparison websites, just checking in that you're still in the market, because a lot of sort of banks and these financial institutions, they look after new customers. So they try and incentivize new customers to come across, but they don't sort of look after existing customers that well. So there's probably, you can always probably improve in those areas every 1 to 2 years as well.
Now, before we just jump to an ad break, I'd like to know what is your why, Ben? Like, what are you trying to work towards? I mean, you're always dishing out advice, but I'd love to know on your side of the fence. Are you a fire guy? You're searching for a number, or what is your why?
I've got a young family, so I've got pretty much a 2-year-old, and we've got our next one due in 3 weeks. So
congrats.
For me, it's really about probably when I grew up, I had a lot of space. We had like a big backyard, swimming pool, and playing with friends was like, that's what I remember from my childhood. So I want to be able to give that to my kids. So at the moment, my why is really working hard to be able to purchase a bigger house so that my kids can grow up. So that's my why at the moment.
Love that. Yes, fond memories of running around in big backyard in Wagga as well, but here in Sydney, few and far between.
It's like anyway, having any type of land is like a distant dream.
Yes. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, but then on the other side, we're going to go through some ways that we can support our financial well-being at different stages of life, whether we're just starting out or at that stage of transitioning into retirement, and what we can be doing at each of those stages. So we'll be right back. Well, welcome back. We are here with Ben Wauchope from Wealth Health Co., a financial planning firm and mortgage broking service. And we're discussing the cost of living and also financial well-being. Now, Ben, you've recently written some content around how to build and support well-being at different life stages. And I think that's quite important because what we do when we're in our early teens and 20s is probably very different to those that are in their 40s and then going on to retirement later in life. So we want to understand how you think about each of those life stages. So let's start with what you classified as the wealth starters. Who are they, and what matters at this stage of one's sort of financial well-being journey?
Yeah, so wealth starters, I would say, those people in their sort of 20s and early, maybe up to 35. So I guess, you've just started earning reliable income. I guess the first thing is getting good habits around your cash flow. As I said before, earlier in the podcast, that cash flow is the number one thing to make sure you're sort of, I guess, you're building on your finances. So control your spending, develop sort of the discipline to live within your income, so that you don't fall into sort of bad financial habits, including those sort of debt traps. So spending money that you don't have on credit cards or buy now, pay later schemes. Prepare for emergencies. So as I said before, building up a cash buffer so that if you are hit with some unexpected costs, you've got the ability to pay them. Starting to look to invest in your future, I think, is really important as well. So, whether that's sort of initiating some sort of small investment plan, just getting into the habit of putting some money away for the future. I mean, you've got your superannuation that's going to be coming in automatically, but by the time you retire, that's going to that age is getting pushed out and out. So having some other sort of source of passive income source that you're building over time, and it doesn't have to be a big amount, but just getting in that habit of putting something away. So I'd say, those are the major things at the wealth starter stage.
One question we got from the community, Ben, was around the stock market and investing, I guess, at the moment. So for any young clients that you have coming through, the wealth starters, or I guess kids of any clients that you have that are in that wealth starter mindset and stage, how are you advising them to think about investing in the stock market at the moment?
Yeah, so I guess, where I start is coming down to why. Like, why are you investing? So
to get rich.
Well, I had a client call the other day. So it was a sister of a client, and she said, her brother, who's a client of mine, he set up this investment, and And so I think I need to set one up as well. And just because he had done it and, she saw him doing it and that's probably a good idea. And I sort of started, delving into that more around, what's your current situation? And they were in the process of building their house, and they had, rising interest rates, and they had an offset account in their house. And after going through all sort of, I guess, what was important to them, it turned out that, maybe just wait until the house is finished, until the dust has settled on that. We know a bit more about your incoming and outgoings at that stage, that will just hold off putting an investment plan together, because you've got other issues to focus on now. But I guess if it does turn out that investing is appropriate, because ultimately investing is a strategy that's going to help you achieve your longer term goals faster by making your money work harder for you. So that's what investing is, right? I guess I sort of run through a 5-step process. I won't go into too much detail, but it's sort of, I guess, defining what entity you're going to be investing in, whether it's your personal name or whether it's a investment bond or your partner's name or a family trust. So there are different entities that you can invest in, and that's going to affect the rate of tax that you pay. So that's the first point. You're then looking at, I guess, your investment preferences. So active versus passive management. Are you looking at an ethical investment portfolio? Things like that. Platform choice. So what platform are you going to be investing in? And this will really come back to trying to limit transaction costs. So obviously, as technology's got better, there are a lot more platforms out there to use. So just making the right decision based on how much you're going to be investing up front and ongoing. And then ultimately, what investment instrument are you going to be using? Are we going to be investing into direct shares or ETFs, so exchange traded funds or managed funds? So that's a bit of a process that we go through before we actually get to, what are we actually doing?
One other question that we sometimes get around the wealth starter life stage, I guess, before we get on to the next couple. We've mentioned emergency funds a few times. Do you have a rule of thumb about how big they should be?
Yeah, no. Is the short answer.
Yeah, no.
So where I begin with that is, most people have an idea of what makes them feel comfortable by having a certain amount of money in their bank account at all times. And I get a wide-ranging response to that question when I first sit down with my clients, and it's either sort of towards the lower points around the $10,000 mark. But some people don't feel comfortable unless they've got 3 or 6 months worth of living expenses in the bank account. So I think it comes back to what you feel comfortable with, and I guess it also, what is your monthly expenditure? Because if you've got, if you're earning more but your monthly expenditure is higher, then I think you've probably got to have a higher emergency account as well. As opposed to if you're living at home with mum and dad and your costs are really low, you might not be earning as much, then having a lower buffer is probably going to be okay.
Then your emergency fund is just your mum and dad's emergency fund.
I think as well, speaking of cost of living and stuff, like it's important to check your emergency account, I think, regularly, to be like, is it actually, if I was to go out of work right now, is it actually enough to sustain?
Oh, yeah. Or is it still based on 22-year-old Bryce's
Exactly,
expenses?
yeah. Is it still based on when I didn't have an increase in rent and all those sorts of things? So I think it's important. All right, so the next one is wealth accumulators. So I've set up my emergency fund. I've got good cash flow. I'm comfortable with the foundations. Now I'm in that stage of life where I'm trying to really get the wheels turning and building wealth. Who do you define as the wealth accumulators? And at this point in one's life, what is it important to focus on? Yeah,
so I think wealth accumulators are those sort of probably aged between 30 and 55. So you should be really focusing on growing your income. So you should progress through your working career a little bit more. And so it's important that you're looking at opportunities to build your savings and contributions to your wealth creation plan. So really working on the income side of things. Also avoiding lifestyle creep, I think, is important here. So what that is when people generally earn more, they start spending more. So, treat yourself type of thing. I'm now earning more, I can spend more on myself. I think that's important to, try and still live within your means, especially if if you don't have kids. Once you have kids, and as I've found, and you go down to one income, things get a lot tighter, and you don't necessarily have the ability to put as much away. So, if you're what they call sink or dink, so single income, no kids, or dual income, no kids, really focus on sort of making hay whilst the sun shines, as they say, and putting a lot of that surplus income away, as opposed to spending it on lifestyle choices. At that stage as well, you're sort of looking at your estate planning. So if something did happen to me, who's the money going to go to? So looking at things like your will and your super death benefit nominations, and having that investment plan in place as well is going to be super important.
So I'm 32, recently married, and I think my mum messaged me recently. It was like, "Have you sorted your will?" And it's just such a thing that you're just like, wow, we don't want to do this now. No, we haven't. But it feels like it's definitely getting to that point where, you should get those things sorted.
Surely it would just be an equal split between your wife and me.
He's absolutely nailed it. No.
So Ben, speaking of Bryce's life stages, he's in that wealth accumulator stage. He's got married. He's looking for a house, getting frustrated by Sydney property prices, and maybe, allegedly, thinking about having a kid. What are the things he should be doing as currently a dual income, no kids household, but maybe soon kids on the way? How do you set yourself up financially for that?
Yeah, so I guess having that cash flow plan in place and knowing that you're putting money aside to those future goals, such as buying the first house, and looking at tax effective sort of opportunities. Like, I know you could consider the First Home Super Saver scheme. It's just one way to save for your first house in a tax effective manner. Now that the scheme's quite complicated, but so I won't go into it too much more, but that's one option I would say.
As is everything with super, to be honest.
It's
unnecessarily complicated. Yeah. I do like the comment though around the lifestyle creep. I think that is one. You can grow your income, but I think we posted a quote on our Instagram the other day from Morgan Housel, and it was, the most powerful way to grow your money is learning to live with less, since that's one thing you can absolutely control. So if you do get that pay rise, it's the more you can bank that pay rise, obviously the better off you are long term.
Yeah, especially over in the West here, we have a lot of sort of mining and FIFO workers who are on extremely inflated income. Well, they work hard, but they're on big incomes. But you sit down and they've been working in the mining sector for 10 years and they've really got nothing to show for it, because that's very categorize them in all into one there, but it is a common thing where they don't know how to control their expenditure. They start earning more, and they spend it, so they don't keep any of it.
So let's move to, I guess, the final stage, or the final two stages of life, which is wealth transitioners getting ready for retirement, and then actually being retired. So how do we think about money and about growing, or I guess spending wealth at this stage, and what matters? Yeah,
so I think when you're you're coming up to that retirement, it's really, well, one is knowing what it costs you to live again. So it's the common theme around cash flow. But when we work with sort of pre-retirees, so those within 5 years of retiring, it's knowing what it's going to cost them to live, because then we can sort of we can use modelling and projections to work out, okay, well, if you were to retire at this age and stop earning any money, and you're relying on your assets to sort of support you throughout retirement, obviously, if you're spending $120,000, it costs you $120,000 a year to live versus $60,000 to live. You're going to have to have a lot more capital there to support you through retirement, or you're going to have to work longer. So really knowing what it costs you to live, also how your sort of your current assets are invested, because you don't want sort of, I guess, sequencing risk, which is, I guess, a risk where you're coming up to retirement and then we have another sort of, market downturn, global financial crisis, and you're still heavily invested in growth assets that then take, a massive hit, and you're forced to start, selling down some of those assets to live on once you've retired. And that's where you're sort of crystallizing sort of some major capital losses as well. So knowing your sort of, I guess, your overall asset allocation and investment risks is important at that stage. Minimizing tax. So you say that super is not the easiest thing to understand, but it becomes even more complicated as you get into retirement, looking at things like account-based pensions and structuring your assets for Centrelink in the future, if it's sort of applicable to you. So probably seeking financial advice at that stage is super important, because there's so much, I guess, that you can do at that stage to maximize your position moving forward.
Nice, Ben. Well, we've reached the end of all the questions that have come through from the community, and some great pieces of advice in there. I think a lot that are applicable, given what we're all sort of facing at the moment with increases in rent, interest rates. Like, we're all certainly, trying to stay ahead and make sure that our cash flow plan is right for the time. So we very much appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. And just a reminder for the Equity Mates community, if you would like to ask a question for our next advisor, you can hit us up at ask@equitymates.com. Similarly, I will add in the link to the blog posts that Ben has written in a bit more detail around the different stages of life and how to set up for financial well-being. But Ben, is there anywhere that our audience can go to get in contact with you if they'd like more information or to set up a session with Wealth Health?
Yeah, firstly, thanks for having me again. And then it's just www.wealthhealthco.com.au is our website. There's a sort of an inquiry box on there that they can send an inquiry through to reach out if that's something they want to do.
Great. Well, we really appreciate it, Ben. As we said it in our intro, it's we like being able to connect our audience with advisors from around Australia, because it's it's important to be able to hear from the experts in times like this. So thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks.
You have been listening to an Equity Mates Media production. In the spirit of reconciliation, Equity Mates Media acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. This podcast is intended for education and entertainment purposes. Any advice is general advice only and has not taken into account your personal financial circumstances, needs or objectives. Before acting on general advice, you should consider if it is relevant to your needs and read the relevant product disclosure statement. And if you're unsure, please speak to a financial professional. The hosts of this podcast and their guests may have positions in the companies mentioned. Equity Mates Media operates under an Australian Financial Services Licence 540697.